Neil Diamond, one of the world's biggest selling pop stars, he's more commonly known as a superstar, is, despite his world renown, a man we know little about. The reason for that is simple. Neil Diamond has never given a television interview, except at occasional press conferences. Never has Neil Diamond actually talked about himself. I've been given the privilege of conducting this exclusive interview with a man who is making show business history, a man who gave up singing for 3 years because he wanted to find himself. He wanted to be more than just a complete songwriter or complete performer. He wanted to be a complete person and a complete father. 35 years old, he's a multi-millionaire. One record album of his, Hot August Night, made record-selling history in Australia. You'll find a copy of it in 1 out of every 4 Australian homes. Tonight, let's meet Neil Diamond, the songwriter, the artist, the superstar, and the solitary man.
Melinda was mine till the time that I found her holding Jim, loving him. Then you came along, loving me strong. That's what I thought, me and you. But that died too. Don't know that I will, but until I can find me, we'll gather to stay and won't play games behind me. I'll be what I am, solitary man, solitary man.
Sure looks like me.
Neil Diamond, welcome.
Yes.
And thank you for being here.
Thank you, Michael.
Are you a solitary man?
I suppose that I am, but probably no more than most other people. You know, when you're exposed to the public, when you're put in the public's eye, you're confronted with pressures and situations that the average person doesn't really experience. And so, like just every other person around the world, I seek out my time for myself and for the things that I consider important above and beyond what I do, the work that I do.
Do you like making friends?
I like friends, but friends are rare. I think if over a lifetime, if I have 3 or 4 friends, I'd be very happy.
You don't have many close friends, in other words?
I have many friends. I have a few close friends.
When you meet people, do you want to keep contact with them, or do you say hello, nice to meet you, and that's it?
Well, there are people that you want to have contact with, that you want to have continuing relationships with, because they're either interesting or there's something compatible about them that makes you feel good for many reasons. But
you've had 3 years now to find yourself. What did you achieve during those 3 years?
Well, I think the most important thing I achieved was the ability I developed an ability to remove myself from the arena. You know, before then I was always in the arena, whether I was on stage or not. I was always in the arena, and psychologically my mind was there. And being away for this period of time, having the chance to learn, to develop a taste for relaxation and to remove myself, and it was one of the high points of the last 3 years, the ability to relax and remove myself from the extraordinary situation that I got into in the first place, which is the public arena.
Yeah, was it a hard decision for you to make, to say, right, I'm going to risk leaving everything for a couple of years and hope that I can be accepted back again?
It wasn't very hard at all. I'd wanted to do it for about 2 years prior to the time that I had done it, and the year before I did my final tour, I had decided that this would be my last tour for a while. I felt that there were important things that I had to do, and it was a very easy decision to make, and I looked forward to it.
Will you need to do this again periodically?
Oh, yes. I think it's important. I think it's important not only for me, but for anybody who finds himself in a kind of work that puts you under extraordinary pressure. I think it's important to remove yourself, to find yourself again, to replenish all of those juices that make people go and make them function and make them productive. Yes, I want to take sabbaticals periodically. I think it's important.
You've said that you need to be a complete person, and this is why you're doing this. Can you be a complete person while you're a superstar?
Well, you know, superstar is an invention. That word is an invention, and it doesn't really relate to me. It may relate to the press or to the record companies. It doesn't relate to what I am as a person.
You don't think that you're, because you've reached this and because other people are calling you that it has an effect on you?
It doesn't have very much of an effect on me. I'm motivated, and I get my joys from the work that I do. Frankly, I can't deal with the enormity of this success and acceptance, and so I don't deal with it. I deal with my work, and whatever happens beyond that is the fates, you know.
So when people react the way they do towards you and what you read about yourself and see about yourself, you try and disconnect that from the real you.
That's right. I do that. I have to do that.
Do you care about what the people think about you?
Oh, yes, of course. Absolutely. But I care more about what they think of my work than what they think of me, or, well, I want them to like me. I mean, anybody who puts themselves in front of the public wants to be accepted and to be liked. But I would hope that at some point I would be able to be accepted just on the nature of my work and the quality of my work.
Well, we talked to a few people at one of your shows and to get some reaction of what they really think of you.
Okay.
And I think we might just have a look and see what they say and let you hear it.
What does Neil Diamond mean to you?
Oh, terrific.
Terrific!
Great. This is the best show I've ever seen on earth.
Do you think of him as a superstar or as a person himself?
As a person more than anything, just a good songwriter.
But as a person, what sort of person is he?
Moody, very deep, yeah. A lot of meaning behind what he writes, and that brings out his personality.
Oh, he's a singer, he's a good entertainer. That's all.
Do you ever think about his personal identity, what sort of a person he is?
Not particularly. I don't pry into people's private lives.
When you listen to his music, do you think of him as a person or just as a superstar or what?
Probably a superstar, I suppose.
Do you ever stop to think about him as a person in his own right?
No, not really.
As a superstar, it's greatest.
Do you ever stop to think about him as a person?
Not really, no.
What do you think of him as a man?
Beautiful.
Do you think of him as a man, though?
Yes.
What sort of a man is he, though?
Beautiful man.
Just an ordinary man, I suppose. No different than any other man. Just that he's got a good voice.
It's more a personality, I think, than a man.
What sort of a man is he? What makes him tick?
I don't know. Just his music, I think.
Do you care about him as a man?
Not really.
Just his music?
Just his music, yeah.
I don't think him in those terms.
And what sort of terms do you think of him in?
Just his music. I enjoy his music. That's it.
You don't care about him as a personality at all?
No, I don't think that at all.
Well, is that the sort of reaction you would have expected or hoped for?
I'm not sure. It's very interesting because I've never really seen people who've reacted after a show or during a show. It's very rare that you have a chance to sit down with people, and it's embarrassing to ask someone what, you know, I can't do it. But that's interesting. Yes, I would differ with one of the girls who spoke and said, no, I don't really think of him as a person, just his music. And the reality is that if they're familiar with my music, then they're familiar with me, because the music is really a direct reflection of what I am as a person. And I like some of the reactions in the respect that some of those people seem to relate to or didn't want to relate to me as a superstar or a celebrity. I think it's very important to diffuse the myth, because in reality I am just a man like any other man. I happen to write music and songs, and I've been lucky enough to have a great deal of acceptance. But I'm not talking about anything in my music that any other human being on this earth has not felt or cannot feel.
Are you moody?
I used to be very moody. I've learned to deal with it. I've come out of myself a great deal in the last 3.5 years. I like myself better. and I'm not nearly as moody as I was.
Why did you decide to give this interview when you haven't done so before?
Well, I felt that it was very important after seeing the kind of press that was coming out when I got here, that the Australian audience get a chance to see beyond that celebrity kind of a thing, the front page of newspapers all the time, and then realize that there actually was a human being behind that. I don't think it's productive to represent a person purely on the basis of superstar celebrity. It's not real. It's not. You're not seeing a person. And I felt that there was another side, and that it might be good if people got some insight into the other side of the Neil Diamond.
And why don't you do it more frequently? Why haven't you done it before?
Well, I don't do it for many reasons. First of all, because it's primarily not what I do. I'm a writer. I'm a performer. If you wanted to, if you permitted it, then I could do interviews from morning until night, every day of the year. It takes your energy. It's not the primary thing. It's I'm fond of saying that my father told me when I was a boy. He said, "Neil, I want you to always remember this." He said, "Keep your eye on the donut and not on the hole." And the stage and the writing and the performing and the recordings, that's the donut. And I don't want to take the analogy any further. This is not the whole, but it's less important, and so I don't do it.
You like to communicate with people, don't you?
Yes, yes.
In fact, even with an audience of 20, 30,000.
Sure.
Do you try and communicate with them almost individually?
Well, I see an audience more as an individual. I don't see it in numbers. It doesn't matter. Once you get past 1,000 people, you cannot deal with them, in terms of numbers. It's one person, whether it's 40,000 people or, 5,000 people. It's one person that I'm relating to.
Well, I watched you communicate during a song sung blue, and I'd like you to watch yourself communicating, as we can in this very short piece of film.
Funny thing, but you can't sing it with a cry in your voice. And when it's stopped to feeling good, you simply got no choice. Everybody knows. We have a wonderful opportunity here tonight, and that is to create the largest choir known in the history of man. The first Sydney all-mixed choir, 38,000 voices strong. Dare you sing with me? Will you sing it with me? All right.
Do you enjoy performing that?
That song?
Yeah.
Well, you see, that song gives me an opportunity to put myself in a very scary position, because it's one of the exciting things about doing a concert is the unpredictability of any given moment, and that to me is the great fear and the great excitement. It's the charge that I get out of performing. The audience gets the music, and I get the spaces in between the music, which are unpredictable, and I like to let things happen. So this song in particular gives me the opportunity to not only relate to that particular audience, but also to let things happen that would not happen anywhere else, but at that moment, in that audience. And for that reason, for the fear of it, it's the man who climbs Mount Everest and looks down, but it's also enormously exhilarating and exciting, especially when something exciting happens.
What was the inspiration behind that particular song?
Well, inspiration is a large word. Whenever I think of inspiration, I see it with a capital I. And I've only had inspirations in my life, maybe 3 times or 4 times, the kind of inspiration when you felt your heart pounding and, just life rushing through your veins. But the song was, I remember listening to a Mozart piano piece on a recording, and I was very, very attracted by a part of the melody. And it stuck in my mind, and I found myself writing a song the next day where the first 2 melodic phrases were very similar. And I took it my own direction and took it my own way after that. But I suppose that Mozart piece, Piano Concerto 21, was the starting spark for that song.
Where and when do you write best?
Well, writing best happens when it needs to happen. Writing comes at the least predictable moments. I've written some of my best songs in the back of cars, in buses, in hotel rooms. It's really quite unpredictable.
If you are told to write something, can you?
Yes.
Is that difficult?
When it doesn't want to come, it's very difficult. I can write something when I have to write something, but it's not always that very special thing. I much prefer to write when it comes and to leave myself open and to leave my schedule open so that when I feel like writing, everything else ceases, because writing is first for me. All my appointments are canceled. I lock the doors and it's a good feeling too. It's a very up feeling. So when I feel like writing, everything else stops. I write.
You work hard to perform. Do you have to keep fit for that?
You do have to keep fit for performing, but I find the best way to get fit is to actually go out and perform. And it's very difficult the first few times that you do it. I remember we did some concerts in Sacramento in California when we first started in preparation for this tour. And when I got off the stage the first day, and I hadn't been on stage for 3.5 years, my body hurt. I felt that I had been in a prize fight for 10 rounds against Cassius Clay. It was my kidneys, my stomach muscles, everything hurt. I had used muscles that I haven't used in years. But now I'm accustomed to it, and I feel as though I'm getting stronger each time I do it.
Do you do much else? Do you play sport?
Not really. I'm not very much of a sportsman. I prefer to sit and read or think or write. I was lucky in Sydney because the hotel sent up a ping pong table in my room, and just anyone who happened to pass through, we played, which is fantastic exercise,
Neil, are you nervous before a show?
I'm a little nervous. I have butterflies and doubts and all of those things, yes.
Have those doubts ever come true? Have you had problems?
There are the potential when you're performing for an audience, and of course the show is so complicated and intricate. The lighting and the sounds and the music and everything has to work smoothly for it to work smoothly. So there are many places for things to go wrong. And so I just expect things to go wrong, and it doesn't bother me when they do.
You haven't always had it easy, have you?
No, I don't think I have it easy now.
You don't think you have it easy now? No. At the times that you don't have it easy, are you concerned about the future? Do you worry?
Well, when you say easy, do you mean the show is not going well or my writing is not coming? Is that what you mean?
I meant you and upbringing and wealth and the things that go with going through hard times, not just one particular show.
Are you talking about financially?
Yeah, use that as an example.
Well, the most difficult times that I have are when my work isn't coming, when I'm not writing, when I'm not being productive, when I don't feel as though I'm functioning as a person, because when I'm not writing, I have nothing to do. And those are the most difficult times. I find that the money and the financial thing is fine, but at best what it can give you is it can buy you privacy to a degree, which most people get for nothing. But it can do that. It can buy you material things. I've never really developed a taste for material things. So, no, the most productive and fulfilling times are when I'm working and am working well.
I believe you were quick to throw a punch in your youth.
No, actually, I was very much quicker to duck from a punch. We lived in a number of sections of Brooklyn that were poor sections, and when you have poor kids running around, not very much to do, they tend to get into all kinds of trouble. I really wasn't part of that thing. I had just passed through a number of neighborhoods where the prevailing sentiment was that, the gang thing, and it was, and I became a member. I was the youngest member of one gang, and being the youngest and most fragile member, I didn't really get involved in anything with the rest of the guys, although I did, in a number of gang fights, I did end up carrying weapons and things like that. It was, they didn't trust me. I was much too thin and fragile. So I was the gopher for the group.
What role has your childhood played in later life?
Oh, well, it's, childhood shapes you. You're very, you're like soft clay when you're a child in every respect. And there were many positive things that I got out of it. I started working when I was 9 years old with my father. I worked every day after school, and I worked every weekend in the farmers markets around New York. I developed a very close relationship with my father because of it, and I also developed a love for work. I understood it very early in my life, and I came to derive a satisfaction from it.
At what stage did you realize that this was going to be your work?
This work? Well, I suppose it was back of my mind for quite a while. I remember when I was 10 or 11 years old, we had just moved back from Cheyenne, Wyoming. We moved out there, and we lived out west for 3 or 4 years. And I was exposed to cowboys and guitars and singing cowboys, which were my first heroes. The cowboy who would sit on his beautiful white stallion and with his guitar and win the girl because of his beautiful song. And so I became afflicted with that thing while I was in Wyoming. And we came back to New York, and I remember even as a child, they had these advertisements in the back of comic books, and I would read them. If you sold this many Christmas cards, you would win a pair of skates or a guitar. And the thing I always wanted was the guitar.
You like writing poetry, don't you?
I did write poetry, if you could call it poetry, when I was a teenager, but I found it that writing songs, which was, I found it to be much more satisfying, because the music adds a dimension that purely words cannot even begin to touch. Music goes directly to the soul.
Do you try and get a message across with your music, with the songs?
Well, you are talking about something with every song that you write, whether it's an emotional state or a relationship or some fantasy. And of course, the message is whatever that song is about.
Yeah, do you try, though, and get a message across, or do you think really in terms of a bestseller?
No, I've never really thought about bestsellers until the thing was finished. I could sit and listen to it and say, that seems to me to have potential as far as the public is concerned. But while you're doing it, no. I tried that for a long time. When I first started writing songs, I came into New York City, and I started to knock on doors and try and get what I was writing at that time heard. They didn't like it, obviously. I was a new writer, and there were always suggestions. We don't like this, we don't like that, change this. And I tried for a number of years, 7 or 8 years actually, to write what other people thought was what I should be writing. And I was very, very unsuccessful at it. It wasn't satisfying to me, and those songs fade from memory very quickly.
It might be fair to say that you put your message forward in a fairly unusual sort of manner, because sometimes the words are quite unusual. For example, I am, I said, which is one I thought we might just have a listen to a couple of those words now while you're performing them. I'd like you to talk about it afterwards.
LA's fine, the sun shines most of the time. And the feeling is laid back. Palm trees grow and rents are low, but keep thinking about making my way back. New York City born and raised, but nowadays I'm lost between two shores. LA's fine, but it ain't home. New York's home, but it ain't mine no more. I am, I say, to no one there. No one heard, not even the chair. I am, I cry. I can even say why, leaving me lonely still.
Do you feel confident you got a message across in that song?
Well, see, I'm not really aiming so much to get a message across as I am to express some particular emotion or feeling. I think there is a message in that song. It's the story of someone who's experiencing the kind of intense aloneness that most of us have experienced at one point or other in their life.
On the subject of loneliness, apparently you receive quite a bit of mail from people who have a loneliness.
Yes, that's
and communicate
true.
with you.
Yes.
How do you react to that?
Well, obviously I identify with it, I sympathize with it, but I also understand at this point that as you mature and as you grow older, if you're fortunate and if you're looking into yourself and examining yourself, that you can eventually come to terms. I was alone because I wanted to be alone. I was afraid to have people come too close for me, for fear that they might find out what I really was. And I didn't think very much of myself.
You're a thinker, aren't you?
Probably too much of a thinker. Yeah, I'm getting out of that. I'm learning not to think as much.
You're responsible?
Responsible? Mm-hmm. Well, I try to be, yeah.
Because combining the two, you have, and I suppose you've considered this too, quite enormous power. You can reach a lot of people and get your message across to them.
Well, I have yes, I can reach a lot of people and it's not so much message, you see. I don't like messages. Messages go by Railway Express or American Telephone and Telegraph.
But you can communicate your thoughts to
my
other
feelings.
people.
My feelings. My music is mostly emotional. It's mostly on an emotional level.
But let's say you wanted to introduce that into political thinking. You could do it.
The emotional aspect into a political area?
No, take it one step further. If you wanted to get, I know you don't like the word message, but if you wanted to communicate your feelings and your thoughts, you can into political areas.
I suppose I could, but frankly, I've never really been that interested in politics. I find most of it, certainly in the United States, very trivial and very temporary, and I find very few real thinkers in American politics, or people who really have an understanding of the future and, beyond when the next time they come up for election.
You wouldn't, get behind a political candidate and try and help him win?
Oh, yes, I have done that. On
Teddy Kennedy, isn't it?
Well, not so much Teddy Kennedy, although it's possible. He's asked me if I would do some things for him this year. Very selective people that I felt that, yes, the public should know about these people. They might have been underdogs, or I just felt that these were substantial people, sensitive people who really cared about what they were doing.
Well, then is this where your thoughts, your emotions, your feelings can do a lot more?
Well, there is that potential, although the reality of it is that the public really comes to their own conclusions based on many things, based on what they read in the papers, on television, based on their own instincts. I don't think there's anyone with enough power to motivate or to shape the thinking of a public in a direction other than the public is prepared to think in.
And you wouldn't try? In other words, say you decided to back Ted Kennedy. Would you try and mold their thoughts?
No, I don't think. That's not what I do. I could express my own feelings, and I suppose it would be up to people then to reach their own conclusions.
How important is money to you?
Well, money is reasonably important for a number of reasons. First of all, I suppose that my background had something to do with it. I never had much exposure to money when I was a kid. I never really missed it, but it was just something that didn't really enter into my life very much or very often. But I find that money has two main real functions that are productive. First, for privacy, which is important, especially for a writer. And second, because I have...
Can I just stop on that? What do you mean by that?
Well, you must buy your privacy when you're a public person. You must live in areas that are exclusive, simply because you want to go about your everyday life like everyone else. And if you're too much in front of the public, then you can't do that. Everybody wants their 2 minutes or their 10 seconds, which seems very small from the individual's point of view. But of course, when you realize that there are thousands and maybe even hundreds of thousands of people who want that time, you must protect that. First comes my work and my family.
And what else does money mean?
Money also, in a sense, means freedom. The freedom to stop performing for 3 years, the freedom to study and read and to get to know myself. Also, it's being in the public favor is extraordinary and exhilarating, but it's not one of those things that you can count on for the rest of your life, and so you hope that you're able to put enough in the bank so that when the public finally does say, we no longer like you, we like that person, that you don't have to go around and work at jobs that you don't want to work at, that you can live your life and still maintain some semblance of self-respect.
Do you know how much money you now really have? Do you keep a check on what you have?
I don't really know. It gets very complicated after a while. It gets complicated. It's a business, really, and I'm one of the employees of the business. I receive a salary, but I haven't really concerned myself with money. It's my understanding that I have enough to live the way I live now, and that's right where I want it.
Do you spend easily?
Yes, I spend very easily. I don't think...
On yourself?
Not so much on myself, but when I want something, I get it.
Like what?
Anything. New pair of shoes. As many record albums as I want. The best hi-fi systems, the best guitars. Whatever it is that I want.
What about your kids?
My kids are... No, I have to have that under much more control. You see, I'm much more experienced at having no money than at having money, and so I'm just really learning to deal with it. As far as my children are concerned, I try to give them what they need, irrespective of money. And of course, children with their limitless vision want everything that they see, and of course, you can't do that.
But you think you should virtually give them what they want?
Whatever they need, not what they want, because they want everything. What I think they need, what I think is important to their life.
Have you talked to your kids while you've been away?
Yes, I spoke to my son just about an hour before the show.
What sort of conversation do you have with him?
We had a good conversation. He's anxious for me to come home, and I spoke to him for a little while, and I told him about a gift that I got him, and...
Can you tell us what that was?
Yes, I got him a little pencil box with a secret compartment in it to keep his pencils, and then I spoke to his mother for a little while, and I wanted to talk to him again, but he was very emotional about it, and he was very tearful and crying, and he wouldn't go back on the phone. So I told my wife that I'd call back tomorrow and try and talk to him again.
Why can't your wife travel with you?
She can, and she does occasionally. It's very difficult, and while I'm touring, it's work. It's work. It's very difficult work, and it's very intense, and I find it difficult to be a husband and a worker at the same time. I think the two have to be separate, so that when I come home, I can be a father and a husband again without any distractions.
Now, women play quite a role in your life in terms of songs, anyway.
Yes.
I want to talk about perhaps one individual woman where we've just listened to one of your bestsellers. So we'll tune in for a moment to Sweet Caroline.
Real easy. And then we start to build it together, okay? Okay, here we go. A little clapping. Sounds good. All right. Let's do it. Yeah. Sweet Caroline. Good time. Never seemed so good. To believe there never was.
Who was Caroline?
Well, Caroline is probably, I guess, every woman that I've ever met, you know. I don't know if there was a Caroline. It's a story about a relationship between a man and a woman, and you can use any name that you care to use. It so happened that Caroline worked beautifully in the song.
So no particular reason, there was no Caroline that you thought of at the time?
No. Although subconsciously, you know, it's very difficult for me to analyze the songs. You know, they come, I try to let them come as freely as possible without intellectualizing on them. I did not ask myself when I wrote that song, who is Caroline? It was the name that came to mind, and so that was good enough reason.
Now, a few years later, do you get sick of Caroline?
No, I don't. It's one of those songs that have sustained for me. That's one of the beautiful things about songs, is that when you do them well, they can sustain you and give something to you for many years. Whereas a concert, a performance, it's a thing of the moment. It lasts for a period of time, and it's exhilarating like no other experience that I experience in my life. But when it's over, it's over. A piece of music, a song, yes, 10 years later, 100 years later, still.
Neil Diamond might have some vices.
Yes, of course. I have more vices than we have time to talk about here.
I'll name a couple.
Well, I'm addicted to cigarette smoking. I tend to overwork. Those two are, really fit for extended discussion.
Does cigarette smoking cause damage to you, though, particularly in your line?
Yes, it does. I've been warned by my doctors that my singing career will be shortened considerably by it. I've tried just about everything: hypnotism, self-discipline, stopping work, trying other brands of cigarettes, but I'm addicted to them without any question.
Show business personalities and drugs are often connected.
Yes, that's right.
In your life?
They were for a while, to a very limited degree. I don't like to take any kind of drugs into my body. I prefer not to take even aspirin. I don't drink. I've hardly had any alcohol in my life. So there hasn't been very much of a problem in that regard. I don't like taking manufactured things because I don't really know what they do, and frankly, I don't think anyone else, even the manufacturers, know really what they do. So the drug thing hasn't been very much of a problem. I think cigarettes are even more of a problem.
Do you have any major dislikes?
Oh, of course, yes. I like, my dislikes. I dislike insensitive people. I dislike rude people.
Go on.
Yes, I could go on forever.
Are you a patient person?
When my energy is there, I can be very patient. But when my energy goes, and I've been able to predict it fairly well, I have no patience at all. I become a whole different personality.
I believe one of your likes is flowers.
Yes.
And from a special fan.
Thank you. Who's that from?
Someone who specially sent it in for you.
This is really a perfect creation. I look at a rose and I say, God, if I could ever create a song that were that beautiful, I would never have to have any doubts in my whole life. But this is a perfect creation.
Is that why you have a beautiful bouquet or huge setup of flowers on your stage?
Yes.
Which is unusual for a person like you.
It puts me and what I do in perspective. Tendency is very often when you're standing in front of an audience of 20 or 30 or 40,000 people to think, gee, you're really terrific. And you turn around and you look at a rose. It puts you in perspective.
Is life a bore?
A bore? Oh no, life is ever changing, ever interesting, ever expanding, ever incomprehensible, and ever wondrous.
After the first 1 million, 2 million or so, what are the goals?
After the first 1 million or 2 million? The goals have always been the same. Self-perfection, self-analysis, really perfection of myself and to understand what it is that I could contribute and to make that contribution. That always has been the goal, and I suspect that it always will be.
You an emotional person?
I am, but in very specific times. I'm mostly emotional when I'm writing music. I tend to let my emotions go freely when I'm writing, and to keep them very much in containment when I'm doing other things.
Apparently for a while you needed even medical attention. Was that because of the emotions within you?
Medical attention? In what respect?
In terms of needed help, that you, I believe, needed some help at one stage as to which direction.
Psychological?
Yeah.
Yes, I spent the last 3 years with an analyst who really helped me change my life, because it was an opportunity really for me to begin to speak. I never really did talk very much. I always saved the speaking for when I was writing the music. What I had to say came out of the music. And merely sitting and talking with a man 3, 4, 5 days a week for years gave me the experience and the ability to verbalize and to talk, and not the fear of it either.
How did you have the right confidence in that particular person? I mean, do you model yourself on anyone in particular?
I suppose that there are a number of people that I aspire to model myself after.
Anyone that we would know, or someone that you've met privately?
People that I've met privately. I mean, I meet people all the time, and there are things about people, whether it's a driver in this city, or a man that I met in a pub in that city, or the man who does the construction work on my home in Los Angeles, who's 85 years old and has accrued the wisdom that I have not nearly come to know. I learn and I model myself after people that I respect and that I like.
You're basically happy or sad?
Now I'm basically happy because I'm content and fulfilled in my work. I wasn't always happy. There was always that conflict between what you were and what you wanted to be and what you aspired to and what other people thought you should be, and but I've come to terms with that to a large degree, and I know pretty well what I want out of my life, and so I'm pretty happy now.
Clothes are important to you?
Clothes? I would hardly go anywhere without them.
On stage, your selection of clothes?
Yes, absolutely.
Why?
Absolutely. Well, you want to feel very special when you go out on a stage before an audience. It's the same way when you go out for dinner with friends. You want to feel good. You want to, and especially on a stage when you have so many people.
Color?
Color, kind of clothing that you wear. It has to reflect your mood that evening. I never decide on what I'm going to wear until just before the show. Yes, it is very important, and has reflected my emotional state also. When I first started to perform, I wore pure black boots, black pants, black shirt, black guitar. In a sense, it was a way of hiding behind that solid black front of mystery, And as I progressed and grew older and began to learn things, it was interesting because the colors kind of changed. I got into lighter colors, and now I find it difficult to wear purely dark colors.
Neil Diamond, are you a religious person?
No.
Doesn't mean anything to you?
Oh, it means a great deal to me, but I'm not religious. I tend to be a very spiritual person, but religion, organized religion, is created by people who are fallible and...
Do you believe in God?
Yes.
Your children?
Do I have children?
No, do your children? Is that what you're teaching them?
Well, I think that they'll have to reach their own conclusions. It's much too important a subject for me to inflict on them. I think they'll reach their own conclusions about life as they grow older. They're too young now.
Do you fear what's around the corner for you?
I did fear it. I'm not afraid of it now. I'm willing to accept whatever it is. I don't expect to. It's funny, I've had this vision for most of my life that I would not live a very long life, and so I understand that. I'm willing to accept that and do what I can within that period. And that was my main fear, death.
Will you know when your time has come in show business?
Oh, I think I'll know it long before anyone else does.
Will you try and hang on, or will you get the message?
I'll get the message.
And depart, or will you try and... You'll actually get the message and go, or will you try and go on with it?
Well, you know, there are many other things that can satisfy people. One of my dreams that I've had for many years was to be able to subsidize and to open up a camp for children. When I was a child, I was fortunate enough to be accepted into a camp. It was a charity camp, but I went and it exposed me to all kinds of new things. It's one of the things I want to do now with my success. I've been saving money for my concerts now for the last 5 years. I have a substantial sum put away, and next year my goal is to start buying a piece of land and to build my camp.
Have you ever thought of being a factory worker or a bus driver?
Seriously, of actually doing it? No. No, I worked with my father when I was young in a shop, and I learned very quickly the limitations of that. I spent most of my youth looking out of the shop window at the rest of the world and wondering what was happening. I don't want to do that anymore.
Neil Diamond, is that the real name?
That's the real name, yeah.
No change?
No change.
Well, I think our time has come. I'd like to ask you now how you felt during the last hour in this sort of interview.
I thought it was relatively painless, but then again, I expected it to be. I heard that you were quite bright and that you did have a brain to go along with the personality and the looks. Really, the purpose of it was to give some insight beyond the myth, so that people didn't only think of me as someone they saw on the front page dashing from the airplane to the limousine to the hotel.
Do you feel you've achieved that now, to a certain extent?
I think probably people know me a little better now than they did before.
Thank you very much for coming in. It's been tremendous talking to you.
Thank you, Michael.
Good time.